The village of Aldea do Rio Profundo, also known as the village of the Deep River, was surrounded by a dense layer of damp air that was laden with the aroma of moist soil and flowering heliconias. Laughter could be heard coming from the direction of the water's edge as children ran after dazzling dragonflies. The elders, whose features were engraved with the knowledge of old riverbeds, whispered stories of the Curupira while standing under the expansive canopy of a kapok tree. There was a gentle shink of stone against metal that blended with the drone of the jungle as hunters carefully examined their arrows. The community breathed in a tranquility that was both profound and long-standing. Then, the gasp for air occurred. Let us know where you are watching from and what time you found this video. It was not with a crash that he emerged, but rather with the uneasy stillness from the mist coming together. The jungle wall seemed to be impenetrable green at one instant, and then the next, he was standing somewhere just beyond the tree line. His complexion was a dark, aged umber that appeared to absorb the dappled sunshine, and he seemed tall, as if he were impossible to reach. Nevertheless, the horns were the ones that stole the sound of the planet. He had two obsidian curves that swept back from his temples like the polished antlers of a beast that had emerged from a night without stars. These curves glistened with an unnatural internal shine. They did not have straps attached to them. Rather, they effortlessly emerged from the bone and became a part of him. The magic was broken by the gasp of a youngster. Both astonished curiosity and icy, primitive fear were at odds with one another. The instruments were lower, forgotten tales and tales. Despite the fact that their knuckles were white, the hunters continued to hold their fire. These eyes were the color of tarnished copper, reflecting the jungle but containing no spark of its usual life. The person remained completely motionless, studying them with eyes that carried depths that were far older than his apparent middle years. Old Chief Tapira, whose body was hunched but whose spirit was unbowed, walked forward while holding his ceremonial staff, which was carved with anaconda designs. "Quem é você?" Who are you? His voice, which was typically resonant, was tightly constricted with tension. "What brought you here?" "For what reason have you come?" A smooth and seemingly mechanical movement was made by the guy with the horns as he inclined his head. His voice was a deep, resonant hum when he talked. It was devoid of expression, yet nonetheless carried an enormous amount of weight throughout the conversation. Even though it was a language of complicated harmonics, they were able to comprehend it. The meaning of the language bypassed their ears and resonated straight in their thoughts, despite the fact that it was not Portuguese or any other tribal dialect. Their bones shook as they heard the name Kalin. "I am Kalin. I come to witness, to remember." The hunter had the audacity to ask, "Witness what?" as his voice was shaking. "Remember what?" Kalin's eyes, which were colored like tarnished copper, swept over the cottages, the river, and the colorful tapestry of life. "The green heart." Before the silence, Chief Tapira exerted pressure, the fear that was around him like a constrictor in his stomach. Where do you come from, Kalin?" With his complete attention, Kalin switched his sight to the chief. The dim glow that was contained inside his horns pulsed once, but only slowly. It was neither the sky or the ground that he was pointing to with his hand. Rather, it was the air that was all around them. After then, he said a single remark that hit the villagers like a physical blow, plunging the clearing into an absolute quiet that was suffocating. "I come from after." There was a horrible and inexplicable suggestion hanging in the air, not from a clan that is not known, nor from a territory that is far away, but from after. Following what? What about the future? Is this the end? Their perception of the world was completely destroyed as a result of the incredible magnitude of it, which was presented in such a calm and decisive manner. More tightly, women clung to their children. Men exchanged stares that were utterly terrifying. Chief Tapira had a sensation of the world tilting and the blood draining from his face. This was even beyond the realm of stories and ghosts. It was a portent that had been carved out of time itself. He indicated to his grandson with quivering hands, and the grandson immediately hurried for the rare satellite phone that was maintained for use in the event of an emergency. When the Brazilian Federal Police arrived from Manaus, it was a sudden and unexpected shock to everyone. The tranquility of the bush was disrupted by helicopters, and military personnel dressed in tactical gear seemed to be completely out of place among the thatched houses and anxious people. The position of authority was assumed by Inspector Rosa Costa, a lady with keen eyes and a no-nonsense disposition who had been trained in urban favelas. She moved cautiously toward Kalin, her troops establishing a circle around her with a suspicious stance. He maintained an unsettlingly passive stance, therefore inviting them to examine him. Upon closer inspection, the horns were spine-chillingly genuine. They were cold to the touch, thick as polished stone, and yet they hummed softly with an energy that caused the hair on their necks to rise up. The results of the scans performed using portable equipment presented several peculiar findings, including changing energy signatures surrounding the horns and biological readings that were incorrect. His blood, which was obtained with some reluctance, revealed cellular abnormalities that were unlike anything else in their databases. Additionally, it included minuscule particles of a synthetic polymer that science had never seen before. "After," Rosa called out to Kalin, maintaining a steady tone of voice despite the cold that ran down her spine. "After what, Kalin?" When Kalin peered behind her, she saw the deep forest that was swarming with people. "After the green heart stopped beating? After the sky turned gray? After the great silence fell?" His voice maintained that resonant hum, devoid of emotion. Nonetheless, the pictures that his words produced were apocalyptic. "After the great silence fell." The further inquiry, which was directed by Kalin's enigmatic words and the anxious murmurs of the locals, brought Rosa's team further into the woods, particularly close to the location where he had originally disappeared. They did not discover any traces or a camp. Instead, they used deep-ground radar to locate a faint, precisely geometric aberration that was buried 10 meters below the surface. It was a smooth, non-natural structure that was approximately the size of a vehicle and hummed with a residual energy signature that was similar to Kalin's horns. As of today, it seems to be spent and inactive. The genuine dread, however, came from Kalin's silent explanation in response to Rosa's relentless inquiry, as well as the data that was taken from the surface of the building before it became unstable and fell in on itself. There was no such thing as a refugee. Kalin was a scout. He was an advanced scout who had been sent all the way back via a space-time rift that his people had just about mastered. His people were not extraterrestrial beings, but rather us. We are human. Alternatively, what remained of them in a planet that had been engulfed by the ashes of ecological collapse centuries thereafter. He lived at a period when the Amazon, often known as the Green Heart, was a dismal and polluted wilderness. The horns were technology. The horns were time stabilizers and environmental sensors, documenting all that his planet had lost, including the rich biodiversity, the pure air, and the overwhelming amount of life that had been destroyed. In addition, they served as homing beacons. In spite of the fact that his people were not returning to warn or assist, the mission was not to save them, but to rescue them. Oblivion before to their own time. Minerals, rare earth elements, genetic material, everything that may maintain their future, which is desperately lacking in resources, is what they are looking for. It was not going to be a tranquil arrival. Rather, it was going to be a harvest that was desperate and destructive. The space-time fracture point was located here, above the buried gadget, and the village was the space-time equivalent of Ground Zero. In the event that the primary invasion occurred, Aldea do Rio Profundo would serve as the focal point. The news that Rosa brought back to Manaus, and then to Brasilia and beyond, did not only generate anxiety, rather, it sparked a worldwide panic that was filled with a deadly irony. It was neither a demon nor an extraterrestrial that was the terrible figure with horns. He was a scout for an army of our own desperate, resource-hungry ancestors, and he was coming not to safeguard their history, but to consume it. He was the ghost of humanity's future. Now, the first shock that the peasants experienced seemed to be a charming prelude. The truth about the horned man was revealed to the whole world. He sprang from the sterile future that we were obliviously trying to create. Not only did his appearance signify a mystery, but it also signified the beginning of the countdown to an invasion that would come from the very end of time itself. The police cordon that surrounded the settlement was no longer just a containment of the situation. Rather, it was the precarious front line against a temporal catastrophe occurring. Not only did the horrific truth include Kalin's origins, but it also included. It was the hideous who that followed him, as well as the horrific why that followed him. At what point would after become now? This is the question that looms larger than the dampness of the rainforest forest. A frenetic, low-level buzz of fear seemed to have taken the place of the humid quiet that had been present at Aldea do Rio Profundo. In the middle of the thatched roofs proliferated satellite dishes that resembled metallic mushrooms. There were military tents that were disguised in a manner that seemed odd with the vivid forest background. These tents contained grim-faced experts who spoke Portuguese, English, and Mandarin in fast succession into encrypted communications. With the weight of Kalin's revelation exerting a continual pressure behind her eyelids, Inspector Rosa Costa stood at the heart of the storm. It was Kalin himself who continued to be a source of unease. After being confined to a specially designed confinement hut that was not only fortified physically, but also coated with electromagnetic dampeners and radiation shielding based on the strange readings from his horns, he remained immobile for hours, his eyes, which were tarnished copper, riveted on the thick wall of green. When pushed, he would sometimes drink water, but he would not consume the rations that were provided to him. His quiet was deep, and the only thing that broke it was giving replies that were enigmatic and resonant to direct queries regarding the future or the gadget that was buried. The subterranean building, which had been given the codename Kronos Seed by the worldwide research team that had descended, was the focal point of the extensive amount of activity that was taking place. The excavation was thought to be too hazardous. Even the smallest disruption may potentially set off an unforeseen response or speed up the stabilization that Kalin had warned about beforehand. Remote probes and deep imaging sensors, on the other hand, were digging their way towards it. Aris Thorne, a temporal physicist whose views had been consigned to the margins of the scientific community in the past, found himself in the position of leading the scientific charge here. His thin face was illuminated by the light emanating from the several displays that were exhibiting the spectral shape of the Kronos seed. "The energy signature isn't just residual, Inspector," he mumbled to Rosa, his voice tight with amazement and dread at the combination of the two emotions. "It's breathing, pulsing with a rhythm that defies known physics. Kalin's arrival drained it significantly, but it's recharging, drawing ambient energy from the earth, the air, even the damn jungle itself." Rosa stared as the television displayed a sickly green light that was pulsating deep beneath. She was observing the rhythmic pulse. "Recharging for what? The main event?" "Precisely. That is what Thorne responded. Our models suggest when it reaches critical mass and it's accelerating, it won't just open a door. It will forge a stable, traversable bridge, a temporal causeway. The repercussions were so severe that they rendered me helpless." The scout who remained quiet, Kalin, was little more than the first drop of rain that fell before the wave. Meanwhile, the people lived their lives in a condition of horror that was suspended. The river was no longer a place where children played. Suddenly, the tales told by the elders became hushed warnings. Their once vital source of sustenance, the forest, had turned into a source of primitive terror for them. Over the course of one evening, Chief Tapira approached Rosa with his eyes obscured by the droning of the generators. Tapira remarked, "He watches," while pointing in the direction of the confinement hut. "Not the camp, not the machines, the jungle. He watches it like a man watching a dying fire he once loved." Rosa has been impressed by this observation. When she reached the confined area, the dampeners produced a spooky quiet with their presence. As he usually did, Kalin stood with his back to the woods. Rosa said, "You watch the jungle, Kalin," her voice piercing through the fake silence that had been created. "Why?" Kalin started to turn his head in a manner that was nearly imperceptible. Within his horns, there was a dim, internal luminosity that flashed a little bit. As he hummed, "It sings," the resonance was quieter than it had been previously. "The green heart. It sings a song my world has forgotten, a song of life, unfettered, unbroken." There was no connection between the cold that Rosa felt and the air conditioning in the room. Using her hand to indicate his horns, she said, "You record it. With those." She affirmed, "Yes," Kalin said. "The song, the colors unseen by your eyes, the breath of the soil, the pulse of the water, all data for the harvesters." When Rosa saw a crack in his distant manner, she prodded him with the question, "But you listen? You hear the song?" On the very first occasion, Kalin's eyes, which were made of tarnished copper, caught a glimpse of something that was both old and tragic. In a move that seemed to be almost wistful, he gazed back at the forest and said, "I remember echoes, faint like dreams, before the silence, before the gray. The song is beautiful, and its ending is the reason I was sent." The bustle that was going on outside disrupted this seemingly delicate moment. As soon as he walked in, Dr. Thorne seemed pale. "Costa, you need to see this. Now!" During the monitoring station for the Kronos seed, the readings were all over the place. Unpredictable spikes were appearing in the energy pulse. On the other hand, Thorne alluded to a secondary source of information, which was deep ground scans that extended beyond the seed's immediate neighborhood. Despite the fact that his voice was shaking, Thorne replied, "Take a look at the soil composition readings that are radiating outwards from the seed. Subtle shifts, minute, but accelerating. Trace elements vanishing. Microorganisms changing, dying off in specific geometrically precise patterns." Rosa wore a frown. "Contamination? Radiation?" "Worse," Thorne exhaled deeply. "It's like assimilation. The seed isn't just drawing power. It's subtly rewriting the local environment, harmonizing it with elsewhere, with their time." He displayed a complicated graph on his computer. "And it's affecting the villagers. Faint, anomalous biomarkers are showing up in their latest tests. Cellular stress signatures unlike any known toxin or disease. It's temporal radiation, Costa, leaking through the nascent bridge." The dread became much worse. The invasion was not simply about to take place. It had already started its secretive operations, which included poisoning the soil and the people who were standing at ground zero. Kalin was faced once again by Rosa at a later time, when the suffocating cover of the forest darkness was present. "The seed is changing things, Kalin. Poisoning the land, poisoning the people. Is this part of the preparation? Making this time more like yours?" For a considerable amount of time, Kalin did not speak. After then, the hum came back, deeper and more intense. "The bridge must stabilize. The environments must converge. For safe passage, the changes are necessary, collateral." The word fell like a stone into the ground. "The harvesters require efficiency. Your world resists. It fights the harmonization. So it is killing them, Rosa explained in a direct language. The song will fade regardless, Kalin intoned as he returned his sight to the trees that were black inside the forest. The harvesters will ensure it. They will take the notes that remain and leave only the silence. What reverberated through the forest the next morning was not the sound of birdsong, but rather the ferocious coughing of children. The elderly people complained of a severe, bone-aching cold that could not be warmed by fire. It was proven by the team led by Dr. Thorne that temporal radiation sickness, TRS, was spreading across the Aldea do Rio Profundo neighborhood. It was not only that the future was approaching, it was already infecting the present. The secure terminal that Rosa was using flashed a priority signal while she was in the process of coordinating the urgent medical response. In order to prevent the probe from becoming unstable, Thorne's team was able to retrieve a piece that had been deciphered from the deeper depths of the energy matrix of the Kronos seed. Those were not data. It was a kind of clue. There is a complex and recurrent surge of energy that is not directed into space, but rather across time. There was no evidence that it was coming from the seed. It was pointing in the direction of it, coming from the future. It wasn't only that the bridge was stabilizing. From the other side, there was someone or something that was trying to actively reinforce it. There was no passive waiting on the part of the harvesters. There was a push going on. In addition to the fact that the countdown had just begun, the same force that was getting ready to invade was also moving the clock ahead. Kalin heard a bright melody that was now tinted with the discordant static of a coming, voracious future. The jungle held its breath as it listened to this captivating tune.